Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Saikin, and today I'll be reading The Villain's White Halo chapters 3 through 6. As a reminder, this series is rated mature, so please check the description for a link to the content warnings. Fen, Pai, Bai, Hua, Guāng, Huán, The Villain's White Halo by Hao, Da Yi, Juàn, Wei, Shēng, Zhi. Chapter 3. It was the start of spring. The previous night, it had rained over the Guāng range, and fog still shrouded the hills that morning. As though cleansed, the greenery of the landscape was painted in lush hues. With faint mist draping him and dew dampening the hems of his robes, a man passed through the jagged hills via a stone path. His eyes were calm. He walked with a confident, easy gait, yet there was no trace of arrogance in him. By contrast, the girl in pink chasing after him appeared frantic. He Yin gazed at the back of the man in front of her. Shēng had just been conferred the honor of chief disciple of Guāng. For the occasion, he had donned sophisticated, stately ceremonial robes, which were a change from his usual simple attire. A green satin jacket covered his fine, snow-white brocade robe that was embroidered with the open seas and ancient pines. On the lapels and hems of the sleeves were clouds neatly stitched in silver thread. A coiled dragon knot ornament with nephrite was tied around his waist. As he moved, the layers of his expansive sleeves flowed like rolling clouds. The attire accentuated his tall, upright figure. Seeing the distance between them widen, and anxious that she was about to be left behind, He Yin drew in a deep breath and vaulted. Her figure blurred for a moment before she landed in front of the man. Shēng! He wasn't startled by her sudden action. Mei, if you have business with me, please wait until I return, he said calmly. His handsome features were sharp, but thanks to his kind demeanor, he radiated a sense of friendliness and reliability. Some people were endowed with the special ability to sound gentle, raising no anger even when they spoke words of refusal. Luo Mingchen was such a man. Sure of his good temper, He Yin continued to block his way, her mouth turned down into a charming pout. Shēng, I heard you got the Guāng token from Shifu. What are you going to do with it? Her delicate beauty made her seem more like a little cutie than a rude brat. Nonetheless, he remained unmoved. Please return, Mei. I am going down the mountain. Why do you need the Guāng token to go down the mountain? She wrinkled her fine eyebrows and pondered for a moment before a thought struck her. Her sweet almond eyes widened in shock. Are you going to the Guāng dungeon? You're not thinking of visiting that guy, are you, Shēng? He remained silent. She knew he never lied, so this reaction was as good as an admission. It annoyed her even more. Why would you do that? What's so great about Xihua Peak? That guy was clearly plotting to harm us. Shēng, you're now the chief disciple of Guāng. You don't need to worry about him. Mingquan's forehead creased. Please, watch what you say. Mei, but she couldn't help herself. Am I wrong? He'll be stripped of his cultivation and expelled from the mountain in the trial 7 days from now. The way I see it, Xihua Peak can't shield him from a serious crime like injuring other disciples. Not even the sword. Abruptly, she choked, as if throttled by an invisible hand. An enormous terror surged up in her chest, and cold sweat trickled down her neck. This intimidation did not originate from any one person, but rather from a deep-rooted fear within her soul. She was not alone. Almost everyone in the world knew this fear. Even if the sacred name was uttered in passing, any slight disrespect would trigger a rush of the fear carved into one's bones, so oppressive it felt suffocating. Only now did she realize the Shēng's caution to her wasn't to stop her from insulting Yin Biyue. He was worried she'd misspeak against that venerable person. He Yin had indeed forgotten her place. The sword sage, Wei Jinfang, Yin Biyue's master, and Xihua Peak's lord, who had been traveling the world for years, was not someone she could speak of so frivolously. She inhaled and regained her composure. Her tone softened to an anxious plea. Shēng, must you go? Won't you take me along? I also want to see what the dungeon looks like. Unwavering, Guāng shook his head. Please cease this behavior. She wanted to protest, but before she could say anything, Guāng began to ripple like water until he vanished in the blink of an eye. She was shocked at first, but quickly realized what had happened. Shēng might not have been capable of spatial magic, but with the Zangya token in his hand, he could borrow the power of Zangya mountains and move between the mountains arrays in an instant. She stomped the ground hard, frustrated. As the heavy black iron doors of the Zangya dungeon swung open, the darkness behind them spread like an abyss and revealed its true nature. It was no mere dungeon, but more like a beast's maw waiting for prey. Guāng had only taken the first step into the dungeon when his breath caught. He was a spiritual cultivator, and the feeling of restriction on his vital qi's circulation was miserable. At first, the discomfort was minor. As he descended further, the pressure mounted. By the time he reached the bottom, it felt as if he'd been fettered by invisible shackles. Having received outside communication, a guard was already waiting for him at the inside entrance with a flickering lamp in hand. Guāng gave a slight bow. Thank you for the trouble. The guard sidestepped to avoid the bow. Not at all, he said, his voice rough with disuse. Guāng knew the reason he had come here. He was the one Yin Biyue had wanted to kill back at the secret realm of Violet Firmament. The others were just collateral. What he didn't understand was why he and Yin Biyue had known each other since their mortal days at Lan Yuan Academy. Although they hadn't crossed paths after entering the Zangya sect, there had never been any bad blood he could think of between them. He gazed at the dark and frigid dungeon sorrowfully, to think the talented youth he knew had fallen to such a state. The sound of footsteps echoed down the narrow corridor, steady and powerful, reverberating throughout the dungeon. Yin Biyue, leaning against the wall, opened his eyes. He couldn't make out who had come, as his vision had weakened significantly after his vital qi was sealed away. It wasn't until the figure was but 5 steps away that the flickering lamplight illuminated the newcomer's face before him. White robes with a jade crown, strong brows and refined eyes. It was Guāng. Yin Biyue's pupils contracted, and every muscle in his body tensed. He nearly leaped to his feet, but willed himself to relax. His instinctive reaction had been from the OG's intense feelings toward the man that lingered even after the soul had fled. How deep a grudge did he have? The guard handed the lamp over to Guāng and left. Peering into the cell, Guāng tentatively called out to the darkness, Yin Shidi. From the shadows emerged the rustling sound of fabric and the grating clanking of iron chains. The prisoner stepped forward until he came under the candlelight. His face was pale, his eyes downcast. He was dressed in simple robes that lacked any ornamentation. His long hair was unfastened and draped freely down his back. The light of the flickering candle reflected on his expansive white sleeves only further accentuated his emaciated figure. When he looked up and met Guāng's gaze squarely, his eyes were as distant and profound as winter starlight. Guāng paused, taken aback. His ever-sharp intuition told him there was something amiss. The Yin Biyue he remembered wasn't like this. His eyes had always been grim, and on the rare occasions their gazes had met, it felt like the chilling focus of a predator sighting its prey. The coldness emanating from the one in front of him, however, felt more like the innate detachment of a god observing the lower realms from lofty clouds. It bewildered him. Guāng studied Yin Biyue carefully. Since Guāng had first laid eyes on Yin Biyue at the mortal school they had attended. The former had known the latter was good looking. Now, Nua Ming-chen noticed with a start that, although Yin Biyue had not yet matured, his features were fully developed. There was not a flaw to be found in his complexion, from his thin lips to his tall nose, his sword-like brows, and his starlit eyes. He was like the sculpture of a shrine idol that had been carved from white jade with exquisite care. He stood aloof with divine grace, utterly devoid of life. Chapter 4. As Luo Ming-chen watched Yin Biyue, the boy's thin lips parted ever so slightly. Luo Shixiang. The sound of Yin Biyue's voice, both distant and empty of feeling, snapped Luo Ming-chen back to the present. That was how Yin Biyue had addressed him back at the academy. It had been many years since he had last heard Yin Biyue call him that. It was almost as if many things had changed between them after they entered Sangya. The acquaintance they once shared had eroded. They were now no more than strangers. His thoughts drifted far away once again for a fleeting moment. When his gaze fell upon Yin Biyue once more, all the questions he had prepared caught in his throat. His voice grew soft. Yin Shidi. Without waiting to hear more, Yin Biyue spoke up. Have you come to question me about what transpired at the secret realm of Violet Firmament? Luo Ming-chen swallowed the words he wanted to say and nodded. Yes. He didn't know what was wrong with him. The truth of the matter was beyond doubt. Why was he secretly harboring hope? Why was he refusing to believe the boy wanted to hurt him? He even dared to wish Yin Biyue was innocent. He must have gone mad. Luo Ming-chen collected himself and raised his guard anew. However, Yin Biyue said nothing more. He only stared at Luo Ming-chen, and his gaze reflected neither joy nor sorrow. He offered no reasons and no excuses. Nothing to defend himself. There was only the palpable silence in the dungeon. Meanwhile, Yin Biyue was so panicked inside he wanted to bash his head against the wall. What should he say? He had rehearsed the script. The protagonist showed up and lambasted him with accusations, sternly questioning his motives. Yin Biyue would play along and appear to endure the humiliation for a greater cause. He would refuse to defend himself at first. After being pushed into a corner, he would reveal that he'd been coerced by demonic cultivators in the secret realm and had no choice but to set up a spiritual array to injure his fellow disciples. He would explain that he'd only pretended to comply and that he'd planned to take down the demons in a blaze of mutual destruction and sacrifice himself at the final moment. See what an exceptional script that is. Dramatic conflict, character arcs, it has everything. Although there were thousands of plot holes, with his years of superb acting combined with the protagonist's soft heart, he was 70% sure he could bluff his way through. Then, when the public trial came around, the protagonist's testimony and plea for mercy would be the perfect turning point. But what now? Protagonist, you're not reading your lines. Before Yin Biyue had sorted his thoughts, he saw the other man wrinkle his eyebrows as if displeased with his silence. Screw it, he'd just play it by ear, do or die. Just as Yin Biyue raised his gaze to speak, he met a pair of abyssal eyes. They were black as a well of ink and resembled an infinite maelstrom that could suck in the human soul. Yin Biyue was taken aback. The Gara pupil technique? Luo Ming-chen knew the Gara pupil technique? What the heck? What happened to your bleeding heart, protagonist? Why are you opening with a powerful attack? After so many rounds of transmigration, Yin Biyue was experienced in this type of heart-stealing magic. It was similar to the demonic sect's bewitchment and could even manipulate another's mind when cultivated to the extreme. However, the pupil technique Luo Ming-chen was using was an orthodox method that did not cause any harm to the mind. It demanded extraordinary talent to cultivate, and at Luo Ming-chen's current level, he could only disorient the target and compel them to spill the truth. Nonetheless, it was potent enough that Yin Biyue's cultivation could not block it. Not even Liu Qishuang could defend against it if she were caught off guard. Yin Biyue marveled at how overpowered the protagonist was. That he could pick up such a difficult technique was ludicrous. At the same time, Yin Biyue wanted to slap his own thighs and laugh uncontrollably, because after so many years of transmigration, he had nothing if not the ability to harden his soul against such attacks. It was akin to the unyielding strength of 24-karat gold titanium alloy, never before defeated. You want some of this? Come at me, bro. But alas, this charade must go on. Luo Mingchen saw that Yin Biyue was briefly stunned by his technique, but soon his distant eyes clouded over with a veil of mist carried on a mountain breeze. His gaze, now blank with childlike innocence, dampened Luo Mingchen's next words. An inexplicable sense of guilt washed over him. Shidi, why did you try to kill me? Luo Mingchen asked. Yin Biyue wanted to slap him across the face. Young man, how could you be so clueless about a villain's heart? Having his exceptional talent constantly overshadowed until it finally drove him to evil was the basic setup of a villain. The OG had been the top student of the academy, but after Luo Mingchen entered the sect, he'd outshined Yin Biyue time and time again. 20 times a day, the OG encountered gossips whispering among themselves. It had started with Luo Shixiang isn't as gifted as Yin Shixiang, but he's really nice, and had ended with, what's the point of that Yin guy entering Xihua Peak? Luo Shixiang is 100 times better than he'll ever be. At first, Yin Biyue had merely been proud and aloof with little regard for socializing with others. However, in his 2 years alongside Luo Mingchen, his personality had twisted. In the end, he made a mad dash toward darkness and vengeance. Yin Biyue broke into a faint smile. It rippled and undulated in his eyes like a pond disturbed by a pebble. Then his eyes seemed to melt into a vernal breeze that danced through an entire mountain of peach blossoms. It was intoxicating, as though a celestial being who'd once belonged to the heavens had returned to the mortal world because of this single curl of the lips. Shixiang, have you come to see me? How nice. Yin Biyue tilted his head in wonder with a hint of a child's naivete. I'm so glad I could see you again. Luo Mingchen was stunned. Why would his Shidi say that? This Yin Biyue was truly a stranger to him. It was as if he'd stripped himself of his defenses and melted the ice that kept others at arm's length. He was real and vulnerable. Yes, vulnerable. Luo Mingchen couldn't understand how such a proud, cold person could become vulnerable, or why his heart ached at the realization. Yin Biyue was immersed in his acting until he saw emotion flicker in his Shixiang's eyes. He snapped out of it with a shudder. He might have gone overboard. Had he roused Luo Mingchen's suspicions? Wait, of course, the question was, why did you try to kill me? Someone under the spell of the pupil technique would never have answered anything irrelevant. He'd been too arrogant, too careless. If Luo Mingchen detected the anomaly in his soul, he had to say something to distract Luo Mingchen from his mistake ASAP. But how? Yin Biyue continued to maintain a dazed look on his face, but his brain was working at full speed. With this long of a pause, even a bleeding heart would know something was up. Ding! To help customers better understand the usage of this product, we are offering 3 complimentary test runs to assist you in resolving life's challenges. Do you wish to use one now? What do you mean, a test run? Luo Mingchen's eyebrows drew together. Yes! Resolve my life's challenge right now! Ding! Halo Helper at your service. Yin Biyue felt himself stiffen, as if an invisible rope had appeared in his body. His muscles were guided into forming a different expression. He withdrew his smile. You thought I wanted to kill you? He murmured, like he was both asking himself and answering the other's question. His voice trailed into an imperceptible quiver at the end from the feigned effort of suppressing his surging emotions. Kill you? Why would I do that? Luo Shixiang, didn't you know? A radiant light shone from his cool eyes. brightened by a blazing fury, he stared at the man before him. Even if I died, I would never allow anything to happen to you. Luo Mingquan was deeply shaken. Yin Biyue's eyes flashed with madness, obsession, bitterness, resentment, and an emotion Luo Mingquan couldn't name. This profound mixture gathered in Yin Biyue's beautiful, faintly red-rimmed eyes. Shidi, you... Luo Mingquan trailed off. I only wanted to leave Cangya together with you. I never meant to make a killing array. How did the transportation array turn into the Crimson Omen? Why weren't its effects limited to you? I couldn't control it. Even though I followed exactly what that person told me to do, Yin Biyue lunged forward and grabbed the cage, his iron shackles clanging as his pale fingers gripped the black iron bars. Leave Zangya? Together? Luo Mingquan couldn't take his eyes off the heavy chains that bound those fragile wrists. Leave Zangya? Who told you to do that? Where are you bringing me? Inside the secret realm, I encountered a cultivator from the Lake of Pure Water. He told me he knew how to grant my wish. The boy grew emotional, and his voice raised as his thin shoulders trembled. Where was I taking you? You made me a promise, Shēng. The Academy's teacher said, a gentleman's promise cannot be retracted. Have you really forgotten everything? The Lake of Pure Water. Understanding dawned on Luo Mingquan. Yes, the Lake of Pure Water. Shidi had to have encountered a demonic cultivator there and fallen for his designs. Before Luo Mingquan could pursue the thought further and question Yin Biyue, he rambled on by himself. It was to Qiang Prefecture. I knew you wouldn't want to go with me, so I came up with a plan. The smile returned to Yin Biyue's face as his eyes shone once more, as if telling Luo Mingquan, aren't I clever? Compliment me. However, the blossoming smile wilted back into sorrow. But, Shēng, why did you change? Luo Mingquan's eyes widened in disbelief. How had Yin Biyue known about Qiang Prefecture? Luo Mingquan jolted back. He had to be careful. Violent fluctuation of emotions under the pupil technique's influence could easily damage the mind. Instinct told him that the questions had to stop here. Yin Biyue seemed about to reveal some unknown secret. Spirit return, break! Luo Mingquan hissed. Unfortunately, his current cultivation did not include the ability to cast spells as fast as he could speak. It was too late. That mid-autumn night 3 years ago at the graduation celebration at Lanyuan Academy, Yin Biyue said slowly. Chapter 5. Can we really not get in touch with Mr. Villain? Liu Xiaodai asked, hunched over the table. He sounded dispirited. If anything goes sideways with that halo, I'll have to walk. Guāng Wei crawled out of the half-assembled transmigration machine and wiped his face clean. I haven't detected any fluctuations at all. What's the wrong halo used for again? Auto-exoneration? That's not so bad. But it was still being calibrated. We don't know what side effects it might have. Haha, what side effects does a white halo even have? Turning someone albino? When Liu Xiaodai shot him a death glare, Guāng Wei shut up and ducked his head. What? Is that actually possible? The test run of Halo Helper is over. Dear customer, you have 2 test runs remaining. Luo Mingquan was long gone by the time the digital notification pinged Yin Biyue back to reality. During his interaction with Luo Mingquan, the holes in his memory about the academy had mostly been patched. It appeared he had to come in contact with relevant persons to activate related memories. He'd been so busy watching the deluge of memories that he hadn't focused on what expressions he'd made or words he'd said while under the Halo's control. Despite the memory patch, Yin Biyue was still confused about the situation. In his memories, he'd attended the graduation celebration at the academy, but had retired early after a few drinks. Judging by the way Luo Mingquan had looked conflicted, pained and remorseful. Could he have owed money to the OG Yin Biyue? No, that was too basic. Could he have slept with a chick the OG had a crush on? Pfft, nah. Tang Ya's teachings emphasized the restraint of desires. If he had ejaculated his vital essence so early, it would have been impossible for him to enter the sect. Could it be that Xiang Prefecture was some kind of leverage against the protagonist? Had he run away out of guilt because it had been exposed? Trying to figure it out made Yin Biyue's head spin. Nevertheless, this counted as fooling the protagonist, right? He would trust the Halo helper this once. He sat down in the corner of the cell and settled into a comfortable position to continue organizing the scattered memories in his brain. The atmosphere of the dungeon was pure darkness, and it significantly improved Yin Biyue's sleep quality. 7 days passed in a flash. The day he was taken out of his cell was clear and fresh with a gentle breeze that soothed the soul. Before he stepped out of the dungeon, the guard handed him a massive black cloak. It was thanks to the hood veiling his eyes that he wasn't blinded by the brightness of day. He savored the fresh air and gazed upon the expanse of lush green mountain ranges that stretched as far as he could see. 4 disciplinary disciples dressed in Tang Ya's sect uniforms came to take custody of Yin Biyue from the dungeon guard. With 2 leading the way and 2 bringing up the rear, they escorted him up the mountain toward the main peak's Tsinghe Hall for public trial. Yin Biyue hadn't been well liked in the past because he was proud and cheerless. Now, after hurting his fellow disciples, he was downright reviled for his ruthlessness. Every one of the disciples in the escort regarded him with contempt. One even scoffed at him. Yin Biyue was secretly in awe. A major sect really was on another level. What impeccable comportment that none of them cursed at him aloud. He hadn't moved much since his imprisonment, and his cultivation had been sealed. Perhaps the oppressive power of Tang Ya dungeon also played a part. Whatever the case, after a couple of steps, he felt exhausted. His legs were weak and his back ached. As he trudged up the stairs, someone shoved him from behind. "Hurry up!" yelled a disciplinary disciple. An angry rebuke rumbled in like thunder. "Enough!" Yin Biyue's mind was occupied by the public trial, and he was still wrapped up in his thoughts when the interruption occurred. "It's not their fault," he blurted on instinct. "I was too slow." But as soon as he spoke, he tensed up. That voice belonged to Luo Myung-chen. In the distance stood a tiny white shape. The light and agile figure pushed off an ancient forest tree. In only a few leaps, Luo Myung-chen landed in front of the escort. Yin Biyue marveled. That handsome protagonist's face looked even better in the daylight. Tisk, 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 Yin Biyue thought. Luo Myung-chen said nothing, but he fixed his eyes on Yin Biyue, as though his throat was caught on 1,000 words he couldn't voice. He didn't even register when the disciplinary disciples cupped their hands, bowed at him, and greeted him with "Luo Shishu." Yin Biyue was baffled. "Protagonist, are you nearsighted? What are you staring at me for?" Since their fateful meeting in the dungeon, Luo Myung-chen hadn't slept a full night. Whenever he closed his eyes, images of the boy in the darkness filled his mind. In them, Yin Biyue wore a faint, innocent smile. Or he was obsessed and mad. Or he was cold and distant as the stars. Luo Myung-chen tried to meditate in search of tranquility, but instead of peace, bits and pieces of their shared 3 years at the academy flashed through his thoughts. Scene after scene, his mind finally settled on the night when moonlight shimmered upon the Water Lotus Pavilion, when he had knocked over his wine cup and stained a part of his moon-white sleeves. Yin Biyue had taken Luo Myung-chen's drunken words that night to heart and clung to them until he'd reached this point. And wasn't it true? Though his shidi was a prodigy, that he'd been young at the time, he was unversed in the ways of the world, pure and naive. Luo Myung-chen had made a promise and broken his word. Yin Biyue's pride prevented him from demanding an explanation for the forgotten promise, so he bottled up his feelings instead. Eventually, the grievance altered his temper, giving rise to obsession, and they ended up here. All that had transpired over the years was now explained. Luo Myung-chen had been the one who ruined Yin Biyue. Before coming here, he'd had a plan. At the end of the day, he was the cause of the incident in the secret realm and was willing to take the blame. While he couldn't reciprocate Yin Biyue's obsessive affection, he could guide him out of confusion and help him leave his infatuation and anger behind. But when Luo Myung-chen saw the frail young man stumble from a push only to straighten up and stand tall, his heart leaped with concern. He sternly reprimanded the escort in a harsh tone he'd never taken before. In only 7 days, Yin Biyue had grown so thin it seemed as if a slight breeze could blow him away. His cool eyes were hidden under the shadow of the large hood over his head. Only his gaunt cheeks and pale lips were visible. If he'd suffered injuries in the secret realm of violent firmament, being shackled and having his cultivation sealed must have felt all the worse. The 4 disciplinary disciples of Yin Biyue's escort bowed. Because Luo Myung-chen hadn't given leave, they didn't dare rise. Luo Shishu had always been gentle and kind. None of them could think of another time when he had ever raised his voice so harshly. To their surprise, a cool voice offered a calm explanation. It's not their fault. I was too slow. He was speaking up for them? Why was he so different from the rumors? Conflicting emotions filled Luo Myung-chen, and he paused for a long time. Are you all right? He finally asked in a pained voice. Then he remembered there were others around. He cleared his throat. At ease, the 4 disciples hurried to step back. Yin Biyue remained silent through it all. Luo Myung-chen's heart clenched with worry. Did his shidi misunderstand and think he had come to mock him? He rushed a few steps forward, frantic to explain himself. Don't worry, I have a way to fix this. Yin Biyue thought Luo Myung-chen's reaction was a bit odd. Wasn't he a little too eager to help? But Yin Biyue promptly dismissed the thought. All hail the bleeding heart. I'm counting on you, protagonist. Expulsion from the sect is fine, as long as I get to keep my cultivation. A gust of easterly wind swept past them just then, rustling through the expansive mountain forest. It ruffled Luo Myung-chen's flowing robes and lifted Yin Biyue's black hood. Luo Myung-chen cried out in shock. Shidi, your hair! As Yin Biyue was facing the wind, his long silver hair cascaded down his shoulders. It shimmered like snow in the morning sun and danced freely in the air. Yin Biyue glanced back, and dread filled him when he saw his white strands. The dungeon was a dark place, and he hadn't paid attention to his appearance. He had no idea when this happened. Was it a side effect of the OG's forceful attempt at breaking the seal on his cultivation? Or was it an anomaly caused by the incompatibility of his soul with the body when he transmigrated? How to explain this rare sign of qi deviation? Fortunately, Luo Myung-chen wasn't using the pupil technique to compel an explanation, so Yin Biyue only needed to stay in character. He shot Luo Myung-chen an impassive look. It's fine, he said coldly, meaning none of your business. Luo Myung-chen felt Yin Biyue's cold demeanor like a fine needle that pierced the softest part of his heart. Even breathing ached. He would prefer his shidi to hate him and yell at him, vibrant with emotions as he had been in the dungeon. Luo Myung-chen didn't want to endure this indifference. He didn't want Yin Biyue to treat him like an insignificant stranger. The 4 disciplinary disciples were also startled. How did Yin Biyue's black hair turn white? Could he have qi deviated? Then they saw Luo Myung-chen's reaction. What was going on? Why was he also different from the rumors? Was there some secret between them? Even the most proper sect enjoyed gossip. The disciplinary disciples bowed their heads in an evasive manner, but their eyes sparkled with curiosity and their ears perked up. These were front row seats. live coverage of the untold tales between the chief disciple of Zhangya sect and the prodigy of Xihua Peak. Alas, the two main actors of the show were destined to disappoint them. Yin Biyue glanced at one of the disciplinary disciples and spoke once more in his cool voice. Let us continue, lest we be late. Ding! The villain expression's sharp glare appeared. Conditions met. The halo is now activated. Yin Biyue freaked out. What villain expression? That was just a casual glance. How is that a sharp glare? How? Now he was going to draw aggro from some rando. Thanks for nothing, Halo. Cheng Shi, the recipient of Yin Biyue's glance, felt as if he'd locked eyes with twin pools of clear, pure spring water. His heart clenched involuntarily. Cheng Shi was a disciple of the disciplinary hall, who'd been given the task of escorting Yin Biyue, and had long since heard of his reputation. The top student of a mortal academy and the once-in-a-lifetime prodigy of Xihua Peak was far beyond the reach of a little disciple of the disciplinary hall like Cheng Shi, but no matter who they were, any souls who injured their fellow disciples were beyond forgiveness. So Cheng Shi had thought. But Yin Biyue wasn't nearly as dark and gloomy as the rumors claimed. Standing there, the thin young man resembled the evergreen pines atop Tianxin Cliff, or the eternal snow of Chen Yun Ridge, icy and lofty, untouchable. He wanted to murder Luo Mingchen out of jealousy? Thoughts of him were nowhere to be found in those eyes. Luo Mingchen's reaction had also been extremely odd. While Cheng Shi was immersed in his thoughts, Yin Biyue shot a look at him and urged the disciplinary disciples on politely. Yin Biyue was thinking of them? Was he worried that they would be punished if they were delayed? Could someone like this really injure a fellow disciple? For the first time, uncertainty surged in Cheng Shi's mind. He cleared his throat to cover his confusion and bowed to Luo Mingchen. The public trial will be held in 2 hours. Please do not make things difficult for us, Luo Shishu. The other 3 disciples bowed as well. Yin Biyue had already turned around and continued the ascent, so the 4 disciples hurried after him. Luo Mingchen wanted to say something more, but he was left only with the sight of a noble figure ascending the steps. A shimmering cascade of white hair spilled across those deep black robes like fresh snow swirling down the high mountains. Luo Mingchen felt lost in a daze. Yin Biyue's pace was steady as he climbed the stone stairs and disappeared, step by step, into the emerald horizon. None could trap him, neither the distant blue skies nor the ranges of 1,000 peaks. Chapter 6. What defined the world? Was it the most primitive powers like the first light of fire in the sprawling wilderness? Was it the domineering nature of hegemonic kings made triumphant through the thunderous hooves of the cavalry riding to the battlefields of the northern frontier? Or was it the civilization sculpted by time as the raging rivers nurtured the settlements along their banks? When the way of the universe prevailed, the world belonged to all. To the multitudinous cultivators, anyone who could reach the summit of Zhangya Range and gaze down at the sweep of 10,000 miles truly stood above the world. This immense realm was divided into 5 continents: East, West, South, North, and Central. A myriad of sects inundated the earth, all with different teachings. But since one man had become a sage 2 centuries ago, only the Zhangya Mountains of the Western continent could claim the uncontested title of #1 sect in the world. This was the reason they were the 1 mountain and 3 Taoist sects, not the 4 Taoist sects. Everyone was well aware that as long as the Sword Sage lived, the current world order would remain as unchangeable as bedrock. He alone could influence the powers that be. The Zhangya Mountains were a nigh endless range that stretched for 100 miles and more. Mist and clouds blanketed its peaks where kite hawks swooped and cranes cried. There were 6 main peaks in the Zhangya Range, each with their own unique dragon vein and terrains, varying from the perilous and majestic to the magnificent and beautiful to the tranquil and remote. Xiqian Peak was the domain of spiritual cultivation, while martial cultivators made Xihua Peak their home. Today, a major event was to take place among those mountains. Qinghe Hall of Xiqian Peak was packed from its gates to its square, a change from its usual emptiness. The crowd rubbed shoulder to shoulder and craned their necks for a better look into the hall. Many disciples had crawled out of bed before the sun was up just to secure front row seats. Dressed in their Zangya uniforms, they whispered among themselves, but they kept their voices low, mindful not to cause a disturbance. In contrast, there were only a handful of people inside the main hall. The spacious Qianghe Hall was so large there seemed no end to its boundaries. Massive gray jade floor tiles shimmered like large mirrors. The tall, expansive ceiling was supported by 20 colossal pillars of white jade that lined the sides of the hall, each as wide as 3 men together. They were intricately carved with reliefs of whimsical clouds and water. 6 elegant Tai Shi armchairs were set at the far end of the great hall. An elder with both white hair and beard sat in the center west seat. He was stern and commanded an aura of authority. Behind him stood a charming girl wearing pink. In the center east seat sat a man with an aloof, calm visage, and behind him stood an extraordinarily gallant woman. They were the cultivators of Xiqian Peak and Xihua Peak, respectively. At their sides were 2 more chairs each, in which rested the 4 other peak lords with their own disciples behind them. Aside from the peak lords, there were about a dozen others who occupied the great hall. One particular gentleman was in a standoff with 10 disciples in Zangya's uniform. "How can you convict someone before the case has been fully investigated?" he demanded. "What else is there to investigate? Is our personal experience not enough evidence?" Huh! The gentleman fanned his folding fan derisively. "So, what you're saying, Shidi, is that the sect leader, my Da Shixiang, the Peak Lords, and our fellow disciples have come for nothing today? All this effort mobilizing the masses for a sham trial?" Even though he was arguing 1 against 10, he was calm and at ease. It didn't take many rounds before the 10 disciples found themselves at a loss for words. The elder in the head seat frowned slightly. Suddenly, a commotion erupted outside the hall, and any whispers fell away as the sea of disciples parted to make a path. Noticing the change, the ones inside the hall turned their attention to the entrance. Step by step, a young man in black, with white hair flowing down his back, approached the hall and crossed the tall threshold. His detached eyes showed no emotion. Everyone drew a sharp breath at the sight of him. Silence descended on the hall. Yin Biyue had to bite back his urge to scream at everyone gawking at him. "What are you looking at, huh? So what if I've got scene kid hair? Even the Shamata cultivation boy deserves respect, okay?" "Shidi, your hair." Yin Biyue met Liu Qishuang's concerned eyes as he stepped into the hall. But Liu Qishuang was even more worried now that she'd seen him. A resounding elderly voice rang out, tolling like a bell reverberating across the empty hills. "The 4th disciple of Zangya Mountain's Xihua Peak, Yin Biyue." Yin Biyue froze at the call. When he raised his eyes, he saw the elder in the head seat of the West glare at him with electrifying intensity. A master at the Great Ascension cultivation level possessed the power to strike awe into another's heart, even when their repressive might was completely withheld. The OG Yin Biyue's memory flashed to life and identified the elder. Sect leader Zhen Yangzi. Yin Biyue stood tall and gave a proper bow. "The disciple is present." On the 7th of last month, 32 disciples testified that you cast the killing array, the Crimson Omen, within the secret realm of Violet Firmament with the intention of murdering your peers. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Yin Biyue looked around at everyone in the hall. Although this was a public trial, only those with power were given seats. Aside from his titular master, the other 5 Peak Lords were present with their trusted disciples. They appeared either indifferent or disdainful. In his master's seat sat a man with a chilling gaze and indiscernible mood. The words, Da Shi Xiang Jun Yu, blinked through Yin Biyue's mind. Behind him stood Liu Qi Shuang, her brow deeply furrowed with worry. Standing closer to Yin Biyue were 10 disciples in Zangya uniforms who glared at him with burning rage. They were probably the representatives of the 32 who had encountered danger within the secret realm. As for the imposing, finely dressed gentlemen who remained composed and at ease, Yin Biyue's memory had yet to provide an identity. He grew anxious. Where was Luo Mingchen? Where had Luo Mingchen gone? Jin Yangzi frowned. No, I have nothing to say, Yin Biyue answered impassively. It was an admission of guilt. Many relaxed at his response, as if that settled things. Someone even scoffed. What was the motive behind your action? Did you have any grievances? Were you under the spell of another or following someone's commands? Such grave crimes warrant the stripping of your cultivation and expelling you from the sect, never to set foot in the Zangya mountains for the rest of your life. Do you understand? Yin Biyue panicked. The tone of Jun Yangzi's interrogation made it obvious he was going through procedures as a formality. Meanwhile, Yin Biyue had no evidence to credibly justify his actions. The reason he'd said no was to stay in character. That part of his memories was too hazy. Any excuse he came up with would be full of holes. Now it was too late to pretend he'd been suffering in silence. In the worst-case scenario, he'd have to weep and desperately repent. The finely dressed gentleman snapped his fan shut and stepped forward to shield Yin Biyue behind him. Yin Biyue eyed this man anew. In solemn and dignified Zangya, it was strange to see someone dressed in a set of long robes embroidered with clusters of begonia flowers. Around his waist was a woven jade-green belt, and his hair was fastened with a crown of rose gold. Despite his flashy dress, he exuded a noble air rather than a vulgar, extravagant one. When memories of this man finally rose in Yin Biyue's mind, the corner of his mouth flickered. Aside from his hatred of the protagonist, the OG didn't have strong feelings about anyone else. His memory only provided simple labels such as Da Shixiang Jun Yu and Shijie Liu Qi Shuang. But when it came to this man, there was actually a short description. Chatterbox, Wu Shidi Duan Chong Shen. Since when did Xihua Peak have a quirky character like that? Regardless, it was unexpected that this man was willing to defend him even when Yin Biyue had never spoken to him before. Duan Chongshen was about to say something when someone beat him to it. Please, wait a moment. The crowd turned their heads to see a handsome young man in plain Taoist robes enter the hall. He was gripping his sword. His hair fell loosely behind his back. His expression was resolute. The hall erupted into chaos inside and out, boiling over with noise. What? Luo Shixiang? Why is he carrying his sword? Is he here to personally punish this Yin guy? Doesn't look that way with the way that he's dressed. Jun Yangzi's brow knit together. The girl in pink behind him gasped. Yin Biyue watched as Luo Mingchen stepped into the hall and brushed past him. Luo Mingchen's eyes were focused forward. Perfect timing, protagonist. I'm counting on you for support. Luo Mingchen marched to about 10 feet away from Jin Yangzi and dropped heavily to his knees, which banged on the gray tiles. This disciple has something to say, he cried in a loud, confident voice. Everyone was taken aback by the sudden turn of events. Jin Yangzi felt his eyelid twitch. At his level of cultivation, he could glimpse into the secrets of the universe and possessed a keen premonition of what was to come. He didn't know what Luo Mingchen was about to say, but instinct told him it wasn't good. It was a deeply ominous feeling. Quiet, he shouted without hesitation. It is not your place to speak. Luo Mingchen kowtowed, and his forehead hit the ground with an audible thud, but before he could speak, he was cut short. Silence, Jin Yangzi admonished again. As soon as he spoke the word, Luo Mingchen lost his voice. Yin Biyue hung his head. Protagonist, you're trying too hard. You didn't need to come in with guns blazing. All you needed to do was say a few soft words to plead for leniency. Your Shifu thought of you as his own son. He would have considered your feelings. The observers outside the hall were spilling over with excitement as countless disciples craned their necks to see what was happening. Hey, why did Duo Shixiang kneel? Move it, you're blocking my view. It was mayhem as the disciplinary disciples guarding the door blocked the onlookers. Back inside the hall, all eyes were on sect leader Zheng Yangzi and Luo Mingchen. Many were surprised. What did the sect leader mean? Luo Mingchen clearly had something to say. Could there be more to the story than met the eye? They turned their gazes to the man sitting in Xihua Peak's head seat, who remained stoic, his emotions indiscernible. Zheng Yangzi drew in a deep breath and waved his hand in dismissal. The verdict of the trial will be announced tomorrow. Rest assured, an answer will be provided. Peak lords and the disciples of Xihua Peak, stay. The rest of you may go. Judging by his tone, the talk would continue behind closed doors. The disciples standing behind the Peak lords tactfully withdrew. The group that had been arguing with Yuan, Chang Shen glanced at the kneeling Luo Mingchen. One of them stepped forward. We trust Luo Shixiang, he proclaimed, and then retreated from the hall too. Yuan, Chang Shen stood back behind Zhen Yu as the disciplinary disciples dispersed the crowd outside the hall. With a muted bang, the massive doors closed, separating the hall from the outside world. As the noise outside died down, some of the gossip also did. Yin Biyue studied those who remained. They were Tsang Ya's core powers, but the protagonist sure was beloved. Those disciples didn't say they trusted the sect leader or Xihua Peak. They specifically said they trusted Luo Mingchen. Tisk tisk. His unearned peers were impressive. None of them left, not even the little servant child. Oh wait, that seemed to have been Jun Yu's page. Zheng Yangzi released the silent spell. What do you have to say? He asked in a grave voice. Kneeling in the center of the hall, Luo Mingchen glanced back over his shoulder. The jade tiles reflected the white-haired young man's upstanding frame. His thin lips were pursed, his eyes calm. For some reason, the sight of Yin Biyue eased Luo Mingchen's troubled mind. No matter the outcome, he knew he wouldn't regret his decision. Thus, everyone inside the hall heard his loud, confident voice declare, "This disciple is willing to take the punishment for Yin Shudi." A few notes. I'm still working out how I want to display the text throughout the videos. I have a few more ideas to try, but I don't want to change things up mid-video too much, so expect at least 1 or 2 more vids before I settle on a method. I'm also working on timing and dead air, and trying to develop a more consistent cadence, so please bear with me as that progresses. There are a few pronunciation mistakes as well, but part of the point of these videos is to practice. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed chapters 3 through 6 of The Villain's White Halo. Join me again next time. Thanks for watching.